When the weather's hot, maintaining a clear focus tends to fluctuate. But the key point is always, if the mind is moving, allow the movement inside the space. So if you get a bit distracted or a bit sleepy, as soon as you are aware of that, you just continue in the openness. The problem is not that you get a momentary slippage one way or the other. The problem is when you apprehend it as something, make a judgment of it, and make a story about it. That's where the danger lies, because that's where the duality begins. But if you get a bit drowsy and then you're here, it's a seamless movement, because the arena of awareness is never divided. So the temporary obscuring or seeming obscuration of that, if it's not attended to, it just is there and then gone, and it leaves no trace at all. The problem is when you think about it and build a story. So that's a key point. Okay, so now at the last part of this section on effortless appearance. It says at the bottom of the page, in brief, the open actuality, the subject, all phenomena which might possibly appear in samsara and nirvana does not abide in any true self-nature, and so is effortlessly arising without any limitation. Now, this is quite a complicated sentence in English, because in the Tibetan language, the structure of the language allows you to place many terms next to each other without determining their direct relationship. So, the open actuality, which is the emptiness, is next to the subject and all phenomena. Now, normally in grammar we say the door is green, the mind is something we use to think about. We make a comment in a grammatical structure which is sequential and developmental. We're building up a picture. But here it's a kind of, almost a kind of bric-a-brac. You know, if somebody's got their stall in the marketplace with stuff they got out of the attic. So you've got the subject, you've got the open dimension, it's all here together. And of course, it is. That's what non-duality means. It's all here together. It's our desire in our logical self is to sort it out into a clear sequence. But it happens all at once. This is what effortlessly arising means. So, when things happen all at once, they're not so amenable to our conceptual making sense of it, but they have their own intrinsic clarity. So all the phenomena which might appear in samsara and nirvana are the radiance of the subject residing in open actuality. So the subject here is not the subject in the duality with the object. The subject means the knower. And the real, or not the real, but the actual truth of the subject is always awareness. There is no other awareness. Like we look with the example with the sun and the moon. The sun is the source of light. The light that comes from the moon is the sun's light. So when our individual subjectivity, me, James, looking out around the room, this is the light of the moon. This is the deflective light of the sun of awareness, which appears to be moving from here to there. So, all the phenomena of samsara and nirvana, as he said earlier, this is experience. Experience is the quality of the subject, and the subject is inseparable from the open actuality. So, if the subject, when we sit in the meditation and we get caught up in something, the clarity of open awareness, which can offer hospitality to the arising and passing of the thought, appears to vanish in the moment of, as it were, my participation in the thought. I start thinking about something. Who is the one who starts thinking about something? This is like a kind of glancing light ray which arises from awareness. It's linked to the ground, but it's like a kind of runaway horse. It's making a bid for freedom. And so we are caught up and carried away by something. Who is carried away? Nobody is carried away. It is a thought, it is an appearance, it's an empty formation. From the very beginning, everything has been non-dual with emptiness. So, when you find yourself distracted in meditation, and you go off, as it were, on a journey, where do you go? You are here. It is as if the subject has gone towards the object, or the object has caught the subject and carried it away. It is as if there is some kind of movement through space, through location, lasting for some duration, but it's always here. It's always here. So this is very helpful when we meditate. Don't be upset by the content of the mind. The content of the mind is always in the space of awareness. So whether the clouds are thick or fine, whether they're full of hailstones or ice or rain or shiny white, whatever the content of the mind, it's always in the sky. So that's what it means here. The open actuality, the ground emptiness itself, manifests as the subject, and the subject is, when clear, when the subject sees its own ground, all that arises, all phenomena of samsara and nirvana are contained within this tigle, this one ball. Nothing is outside the great completion. But when the subject takes the form of a dualistic consciousness and you go with hopes and fears, then the 6 realms of samsara arise from that. But it's the same energy. There is only one ground and one modality of energy. So it's saying that all of these possible formations are devoid of any inherent self-nature. They have no separation. They are the effortless showing or arising of the empty nature of the mind, and this is without limit. This is what this is without limit means. Not as a cognitive projection, but with a deep confidence and clarity. You know what is coming. Everything is empty. Everything is illusion. So whether the illusion is happy or sad, appears to belong to other people or yourself, it's basically ungraspable. You feel sad, you're pervaded by sadness, and it goes. You're happy, and it goes. You're jealous, and it goes. These things arise, fill the space of the mind, and then vanish. And none of them abides, none of them remains. And so he says, these forms are arising without limitation. The reflection has no limit because the reflection remains inside the mirror. Things in this room you can measure because they seem to have a constant quality. You can measure the height of the ceiling, but imagine you had a big mirror here and you see somebody's reflection and you go to measure the distance between their ears. As you go to measure them, they step back. Now their reflection is shrinking. Because the reflection is very labile, it moves around very, very easily. So this is our particular this is the quality of ungraspability. Although we're trying to see size and shape and density and knowability in phenomena, this is the movement of the mind. And he says, no matter how much your mind moves, you never find a concrete, actual defining limit. The truth slips away. So then he says, effortless appearance is introduced in this way so that by removing the wrong idea, one will be free from the desire that another should help one gain enlightenment. So, if I see I am a limited person and I have limited capacity, then of course I need help. I need people to do things for me. Because my potential to carry heavy loads, or my potential to swim across the river, whatever it would be, maybe I have a limited capacity. Because this is constrained by my mode of embodiment. But the mind has no limit, no top, no bottom. And it is infinite. And if we really see the meaning of this and feel it when we are in the open practice, the infinite has nothing outside it. That's why it's called the great completion, because it's an inclusive completion. It's like with, if you have, if you're working in research and you're writing up a report and you're getting it ready for publication, and then you get some new paper coming through on the internet and you start to read it and think, shit, now I have to incorporate this in my paper. Because research never has any end to it. It's always moving on and on. There's no end to thought. There's no end to creative production. That is the content and the movement of the mind. But the mind itself is without limit. It's infinite. And so all the forms of creative production are inside the mind, and they don't alter the nature of the mind. They alter the nature of the content of the mind. Because we have to revise our ways of doing particular transactions according to new technology and so on. So this is what it means. If our mind is infinite, this is until we really directly taste it itself, it's only a hypothesis or a belief. But if our mind is infinite, there's no cavalry coming over the hill to rescue us. We're on our own. But the mind itself is not lonely in being alone. It is infinitely alone. It is the extent of the encompassing of all phenomena. So where would help come from? So within the practices of duality, we pray to Padmasambhava. We say, please come here. You are in Zangdopalri, you're having a nice time, but we're stuck here. Actually, it's not so bad in Germany. The weather's good, the food's actually much better than before. So take your time, Padmasambhava, don't worry too much. But we need you to come and bless us and help us. So we look before, the reason for this is not that we're desperate, because we already have the potential of awakening. It's to dissolve the fantasy that you can do it on your own. And yet he's saying, nobody's coming to help you. So what does that mean? It looks like a contradiction. If no aid is coming from elsewhere, it's all up to me. Where am I? I'm here in this room with all of you, in Germany where there's a lot of people, in Europe where there's a lot of people. There's a lot of resources going on. Where are these resources? Inside my mind. There is no Germany apart from my experience of Germany. I only will ever have access to my experience of Germany. So my experience of Germany is walking down the street, seeing signs in German, which I don't understand. But that is my Germany. You may have a different Germany. You may believe that your Germany is better because you can read German. how will you compare these? This is a key point. It is experience. The biggest toxin from the Buddhist point of view is the belief in objective reality. There are truly self-existing things out there, and I am a self-existing thing in here. I'm just me, the tree is just a tree. Everything is the experience of the mind. So, what do we need in order to gain enlightenment? We need the ground, and we need to be aware of the ground. And awareness of the ground reveals the clarity of the mind, which reveals the flow of energy, which is the relational capacity of interconnectivity of all phenomena. In ordinary language, it's the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. We already have the basis of this. But if we don't see the ground as our ground, if we think I'm just me, and my ground is my history, where I came from, my ground is my national identity or my gender, then this isolating identity formation operating as the individual ground hides the open ground from me. And in that state, of course, you need a lot of help. But if you are open to the ground itself, everything you need is there. The purpose is to be free of the need for seeking and practicing. The essence of that awakening is to have all the phenomena of the possible appearances of samsara and nirvana effortlessly arising in one's own mind. We do seeking and practicing because we want to change how things are. We want to change things because we feel that something is missing. We might like to be healthier, or to earn more money, or to have less anxiety. All of these things may be very helpful. You may have responsibilities you have to fulfill to children and so on. It's not as a need to get your act together and bring in enough money and so on. That has a degree of anxiety in it. But energy is always flowing. So if we stay connected with openness, because we have connectivity with the ground, we're more likely to be able to relate to the world. So when we want to change things, we have already decided there is something wrong. This is a judgment about the quality of the appearance. But what is the appearance? It is empty. So this is where Dzogchen is a little bit demanding, because it says, if you go to heaven, go to heaven. If you go to hell, go to hell. Actually, if you're living in Syria, you don't have much of a choice. When the Chinese came into Tibet, Tibetan people didn't have much of a choice. There's a lot of Chinese soldiers, modern weapons, and the Tibetans had very old guns. So they got defeated, they got locked in prison, they were tortured, lost their land, monasteries pulled down, and so on. These things happen. What shall we do about that? You can say it's a tragedy, you can go for trauma counseling, or you can see, oh, this happens. What is this? This is the radiance of the mind. This is the radiance of the mind. What is cancer? It's the radiance of the mind. What is toothache? It's the radiance of the mind. Now this might seem obscene. This might seem something completely perverse. Something just, for fuck's sake, don't say that. That's horrible. How could you say that the radiance of the Buddha's mind is a mutation in the cells in my body which is going to cause me to die? But we know, having been born, this is a one-way street. We're going towards death. Some people die very young, they die in the womb, others die at birth, others live a long age. We don't know when we're going to die. What is this experience now? So we're back with what we've looked at a lot. I can put my name on it, I can tell it what it is, or I can stay with it as it manifests. There is pain. What is the pain? It's sensation. What is the nature of the sensation? It's ungraspable. Oh, it's intense, it's killing me. That's a storyline. Stay on the point of the pain. And many yogis have done this. When Tenga Rinpoche was very, very sick at the end of his life, he was in excruciating pain. And he's just sitting in the practice. It doesn't mean that he's somehow anesthetized himself with meditation. It's not a buffer zone. The pain is there. But the pain in itself arises and passes, arises and passes. So you have stillness and movement. The awareness is still. Movement is the arising and passing of pain. If I identify with the pain and say, I'm suffering, I hate this is awful. No, the ego subjectivity is moving with the pain and creates a big storm. So that's the function of the meditation. Whether life is going well, don't get carried away. Life is going badly, don't get carried away. What is the quality of experience is what arises, like we did with the chanting. Sangye. Sangye means Buddha. Sangye. But really it's a sound. It's, oh. Pain. Desire. Arising and passing. And then it's gone. So once you grasp it, what you grasp is not the thing itself, because the thing itself is ungraspable. What you grasp is your own conceptual elaboration. Life is ungraspable. So this is very challenging when we are actually sick and when we have fears and anxieties. But always we have the choice to go into the elaborating story or stay with the simplicity. The Buddha's teaching is everything is impermanent. This is impermanent. So when I get caught up in it, it is as if this is the total definition of who I am, and I hate it and I want it to stop and I feel useless and stupid. We've probably all been in situations like that, situations of despair. And then they also pass. They also pass. So what looked like a limit, what was functioning as a limit while you were in it, after a while is gone. So where was the limit? The limit was you limiting yourself by a totalizing grasp of the situation. There is a big difference between totalization and infinity. Totalization is the work of the accountants. They total the sums. They get all the accounts from the year and they add them up and they offset the bits for the government from tax and get relief and so on, and then you get the total statement of the accounts. This is a different kind of completion from infinity. The great completion includes everyone, and you never find its edge. It's complete, but it's not an entity. It doesn't have a top or a bottom, a front or a back. Totalization is the danger. So if you go to the doctor, they give you a diagnosis. Doctors love totalizations. They take all the signs and the symptoms and they wrap it in a box and they whack it and say, you are suffering from this. If you'd gone to see that doctor 50 years ago, they wouldn't have said that. They only say this on the basis of, I've got a shiny new machine, I stick this up your arse. Oh my God, this looks pretty bad. That's how it is. On the basis of new technology, new diagnoses are arising, new treatments are arising. This is impermanent. What have you got depends on the current fashion. We have fashion in Milano, we have fashion in Paris, and you have fashion in the chemical laboratories as well. You have fashions in the operating theatre. Some kind of procedures were done 40 years ago. Nowadays, nobody is doing that procedure. Why? We don't do that. It's fashion. So what am I really suffering from? You're suffering from being born in samsara in a human body and is going to die. And you don't get a menu. You don't get to choose how you're going to die. It's not a punishment. Nobody's doing it to you. This is your karma. Due to causes and conditions, this particular situation is arising. So, it's arising. Yeah, it's dynamic, displaying and vanishing, self-liberating. But I want to live longer. That's a thought, that's a desire. May the wishes of all sentient beings be fulfilled. But you're going to die. I don't want to die. What can we do? You are going to die. We're all going to die. None of us know how we're going to die. Who is going to die? The ego construct, like a sandcastle on the edge of the great ocean, has been built up through being a baby, through going to school, through study, through earning money. You built this edifice of your life. And for some people, there is a slow lapping of little waves that undermine the sandcastle and it falls down. Other people get a big tsunami in a car crash and they vanish. Who dies? The structure of the 5 elements held in place with the 8 consciousnesses dies. Does awareness die? No. How could awareness die? Because it's unborn. So we do the practice and then we have Vajra fearlessness. Death is the ending of a pattern of emergence, of manifestation. The ground of that manifestation doesn't die. So we have emptiness, we have our awareness of the emptiness, which leads to clarity and manifestation. The patterns of our energy change and transform. Sometimes we're sick, sometimes we're healthy. We once were young, now we're getting older. These patterns are the expression of the ground. When the pattern vanishes, the ground is still there. That's why awareness of the ground is the most vital thing. So he says, when you see the ground, you have no need for seeking and practicing. All the phenomena of all the possible appearances of samsara are effortlessly arising in one's own mind. That means my body is arising in my mind. Now I know some people here are really into embodiment and the body this and the body that. But the body is an epiphenomena of the mind. Because your body is experience. If you didn't have a mind, or when the mind goes out of the body, you have a corpse. Dead bodies don't do anything. It is the mind which is the body. The mind is chief. Every school of Buddhism says that. The mind is chief. The mind is the main thing. Nobody says the body is the main thing. Because the body is transient and it's open to all kinds of invasions. You have invasions of pollen, so you get hay fever, allergic reactions to things. You get various viruses, bacteria which are picked up easily and spread. The body is exquisitely vulnerable, easily hurt, and doesn't last all that long. So the body is a mode of experience. It's a mode of revelation of the energy of the ground. But it's not the center of the world. The center is the mind. So all the phenomena of samsara and nirvana, including everything I call I, me, myself, is effortlessly arising in the mind. The mind is not in the body is in the mind. If you get that the wrong way around, then you want to go and get a brain scan. And you lie in there and you go, beep, 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 and then somebody look, oh, something here in the amygdala. Oh, my goodness me. What do you see there, doctor? Doctor, what do you see? Oh, we need to do further tests. And then further tests about what is there. Everything in medicine is about. Meditation is direct. indirect and direct. The doctor will tell you a story about what's wrong with you. When you sit in meditation, you see directly what is there. The mind directly reveals itself. Everything else is stories. Some stories are incredibly helpful. They might save your life. Because we believe when doctors go to medical school, they learn what's in the eye. If you need to get a cataracts dealt with, and somebody's going to take a sharp thing and do cutty in your eye, you say, "Wait, fuck you, can't see anymore, please cut. So, do you know what's inside my eye? Yes, I have studied this. Okay, good. That you can know. They know about the eye. And they've checked out that your eye is not something glass ball that you bought second-hand in India. This is the real Macaw. It's all squishy inside. Just what I like to cut. So, that's helpful knowledge. It's knowledge about the eye. And because you've got a fairly standard issue eye, they can insert. But the surgeons are always amazed by what's inside the human body. All kind of funny business can be there. So, everything is inside the mind. And on a relative level, in the domain of knowing about, this is relative knowledge and is much less reliable. So, now we're marching on at high speed. Thirdly, this natural situation, or how our mind is, or how the universe is, or how it is, it abides as the very pure ground. And this has 5 different aspects. The very pure ground here means kadak, means pure from the very beginning. And this is the purity of the ground, that the ground is never contaminated. So firstly, being naturally empty from the very beginning, the ground, which is our mind, has been pure regarding all the substantial phenomena, and thus it is the very pure sphere. So yin here links it to the Dharma Dhatu. It means it's the space of infinite hospitality to everything which can arise. So the mind, emptiness, and the yin or the Dhatu means about the same. This is pure from the very beginning because regarding all substantial phenomena, it hasn't been touched by them. Why is this? Because there are no substantial phenomena. So the ego is touched by its own delusion of there being substantial phenomena. So we start to get ill or sick in some way. And we think, oh, this is quite difficult. So for example, the hearing in my left ear is not so good now. If somebody is sitting on my left-hand side, sometimes difficult to hear, then I think, oh, maybe I should get some kind of hearing aid. But my friends who have hearing aid are all switching it on. It's very kind of annoying. It's not really finely tuned. So I am gradually dissolving through time. Wear and tear. Reading glasses and all. Reading glasses, no hair, can't hear. At least the teeth are half mine. 50% natural. So, this is what we experience. I am becoming somebody else. I can remember being young and strong and doing many things. No, I'm not doing this. I'm sitting and reading and writing a lot. So this is the modality or the rhythm of existence. Our ego sense of identity is altered by circumstances. At the different stages of our life, we have different amounts of life energy, or prana, chi, libido, whatever. We are out and looking and engaged, and then things start to change. So he's saying all of these shifts in the patterns of phenomena, all the things which seem very real and definitive to the ego, never touch the ground. The ground is untouched. That's why it's pure. Nothing has ever stained it, or defiled it, or altered it, or made it dirty. The ego gets messed up pretty easily. The ego gets upset very, very easily. Parents have difficulties with children, lovers leave us and we're heartbroken, all sorts of accidents, physical accidents, mental breakdowns, and tragedy occurs. Tonight, because it's Friday night, young people would be going out clubbing. And in the club, someone will say, "Do you want to take one of these?" And when you're young and stupid, you say, "Well, of course I want to take it. What is it?" And then some of the people who take this crap that's been cut with all kind of nonsense end up in an ambulance. Some people become psychotic and it takes a long time to recover. Some people don't recover. Some people overheat with pseudo ecstasy and they die. So the situation is very vulnerable. This is the key thing. If you take refuge in making sure you have a happy life, you might be able to manage some of the variables for some of the time, and then it's gone. I personally have been in lots of cities where life has been completely altered. I was in Damascus for a while, I was in Beirut, I was in Baghdad, in Tehran, in Kabul. Who would want to live in any of these cities nowadays? But they used to be, when I was first there in late 1960s, they were very nice places. I remember in Beirut, on the waterfront, diving from the cliffs into the sea. It was really good. It was very relaxed and beautiful. Then they went right through a huge war. Terrible. Many, many people dying. So all the effort that people make to ensure that life is good is easily crumbled. It's not so long since we had war in Europe. I mean, there was war in the Balkans, but are the Balkans really Europe? Yeah, they are. They're very close. In the wars around Turkey and Russia could be, again, very, very close. So, again, it goes back, the central point is, what is your refuge? The ego is vulnerable. The body is vulnerable. Awareness is invulnerable. So then he says, the energy of emptiness is unceasing as experience, and so from the beginning there has been purity regarding mind appearing to be real. This is the very pure original knowing. So he says, what you regard as your mind is the manifestation of energy. The energy is pure from the ground. The mind itself is inseparable from the ground. So the ground is pure, and the emerging energy of the ground is pure, and therefore there has never been any contamination, and so experience is pure in itself. This would normally be called versa, or the clarity, the clear light of the mind. If you see, it is experience. That is to say, you look around the room and you experience red and yellow and blue. You assume the red is painted onto the pillar. Underneath the red paint, there will be cement and maybe a steel bar holding up the ceiling. This is imputation. What you have as experience is red and gold and green and blue. The rest is thought construction, thought projection. The thought projection stabilizes the world. So, the energy of emptiness is unceasing as experience. Everything you experience is just the display of emptiness. And so from the beginning there has been purity regarding the mind, appearing to be real. That is to say, what you take to be real and true and self-existing is purified on the ground which it arises from, which is empty. this is not different from the Heart Sutra. These teachings are, this is a kind of, it's a Dzogchen exposition, and it's laying out things in terms of energy, but it's not really different from the Heart Sutra. Heart Sutra doesn't describe energy, but it's describing how emptiness is form, form is emptiness. It means just because something is empty doesn't mean it doesn't have a form. So if you cross the road without looking and the car hits you, you will die. Or you'll get broken limbs. Then you'll be in a hospital bed with bent legs. That will be the new form, and then you might not be able to walk. You might be in a wheelchair. But that form of being in the wheelchair is just as empty as having healthy legs and running around. All of the forms are empty. The fact that I'm happy to be able to run around and I'm crying because I'm in a wheelchair, the feeling tone doesn't make one thing more real than the other. The feeling tone itself is empty. Because what will you grab in sadness? What do you take hold of in sadness? You're just sad. Sad is a feeling tone which arises, fills you, you're weeping, you're self-pitying, and then it relieves for a while, and then something else arises. So this is what it means. So then he says, the essence of having the non-duality of appearance and emptiness, in this essence, all separate phenomena have been pure from the very beginning, and so it is the very pure non-duality. So, this is exactly the beginning of the Heart Sutra. You see many different things. You learn to name these things. We can look around the room and say, oh, that object will be very heavy to lift, that other object is very light. That's the kind of identification we make very easily. But all of these differentiations, although they're quite accurate, are also the play of emptiness. It's not that we have a logical mind which sits outside of the world, looking at it and comes to definite, clear conclusions about it. Whether something is heavy or light is relative, because when you're a baby you can't lift anything. You can't even lift your own head, you can't lift your own arm, you're a little baby. And then gradually you start to move around and knock things over. And then when you're 18, 20, 25, you start to be able to lift things and make the world lift and move about. And then you get older and you can't lift so much. So heavy and light is relative to our situation. Strong and weak is relative. These are not intrinsic qualities. So, the non-duality of appearance and emptiness, that they are inseparable within this, and this is the pervading essence or true quality of all the seemingly separate phenomena, we see, oh, they have been pure. There has never ever been any true internal defining characteristic. So, if you just had one product, some people would like it and some people wouldn't like it. So we hear that the Buddha taught 84,000 different Dharma teachings because there are different people with different backgrounds. Is this true? When you take the wrapper off, what's inside the 84,000 different dharmas, it all tastes the same. It's all emptiness, absence of inherent self-nature, impermanent, and codependent arising. What else is? Nothing. 84,000 dharmas, all with the same ingredients, but in slightly different proportions. That's all. It's not a lot to understand, but it's hard to live. It's easy to forget, because it's not about accumulating knowledge and ideas. It's about entering into this domain of spontaneous experience, which is to be the ground in its emergence. This is what we all are. We are all the spontaneous emergence of the ground. That's all there is. So there are no separate phenomena at all. Then number 4, that state has not been created suddenly, but has been present from the very beginning, and so it is the natural purity. Ignorance is adventitious. It's like you get little advent calendars coming up to Christmas when you open the little windows in them with numbers and maybe chocolates inside. So something is coming. Christmas is coming. It wasn't there, it will be there. Ignorance emerges in time out of the ground. Awareness doesn't emerge from the ground. It's inseparable from the ground. There is no beginning to awareness. There is a beginning to ignorance, but it is as if ignorance is beginningless. So, if we see that the pure ground hasn't come from someplace, then we say, oh, it's intrinsic. Yene is from the very beginning. So it's called kada, primordial purity. Ka means the beginning, the original. Well, not the original because it doesn't have an origin. It means always there. Always there. Everything else, everything which arises from not seeing the ground is constructed out of the movement of the ground. So the whole of samsara is composite. So some of us were here in the autumn and we looked at this Kunsamonam, this evocation of Buddha Samantabhadra, and it's describing how the ground nature is uncompounded, dumache. It's self-arising or always there, rangjung. It has no beginning and no end. We have a beginning and end. This body, having been born, will die. Our thoughts, feelings, sensations, health, and so on, these are fluctuations. But if you want the true refuge, it's that which is always there. 5, there are no other phenomena which are not pure from the very beginning, and so it is the great purity. You cannot find anything anywhere which is not empty. You yourself might not want to eat big black slugs or these big reddy brown slugs that you get, in the summer. You see them in France. They're really quite long. They're very, very slimy. You might like to have snails cooked in garlic butter. That's one thing. But cold slug alive in your mouth, dying as you chew on it. This is repulsive. Now, the repulsiveness is pure from the very beginning. Because if you have to eat the slug, the feeling tone which arises is a feeling tone. I hate this. All of that is empty. Everything is empty. So the look of the slug, the taste of the slug, the texture, the sliminess, all of it is empty. The fact that you don't like it and maybe you start to vomit because it's so horrible, I can't bear it, nothing is established. Vomiting, as some of you will know, is a process. It arises due to the wonderful power of the muscles contracting. So this is unfolding. It's not a thing. There is no limit. Everything is dynamic. Everything is dynamic. Oh. So there is no limit. It's like the waves in the ocean in the traditional example. The waves are ceaseless. Happy, sad, beautiful, ugly, delicious, repulsive. The waves keep coming. But nothing is created or destroyed in this because the wave is inseparable from the ocean. It has no individuality, although each wave is specific and not exactly identical to the preceding wave or the one that comes after it. Each wave is exactly the same in being composed of the seawater and is uniquely, specifically different in its particular manifestation in that time because of the current and the way the wind is blowing and so on. It's exactly the same. The essence or the heart or the truth of all phenomena is emptiness. Emptiness is the great ocean. But the emptiness manifests in these particular formations. And these formations are all empty because they are arising as the display of emptiness. But within the relative perception of I, me, myself, I like, I don't like, it is as if my attribution of quality and value is a true identification of the truth and value which is intrinsic to the object. This is the problem. Some animals are quite happy to eat slugs. For example, badgers eat slugs. They come out in the middle of the night. Boom! Big badger. Nice. Good for badgers. Not good for us. That's an opinion. Badger says yes. Human says no. Is it good or bad? It depends on if you're born a badger or a human being. That's all. The qualities are situational, they are not intrinsic. If you take away one thing from all of this discussion of the text, that's the key point. That what you say about the world is a projection or manifestation of the patterning of your mind. It is not a true account of what is out there, because what is out there is the potential to reveal what you project on it. The world is like a cinema screen. We're running the movie. So, he's saying that it's impossible anywhere to find any phenomena which have inherent self-nature. Now, this again is not a belief. You can check this out. When you see things which seem to be strongly real, see how it is. So maybe in your kitchen you have a very good Japanese knife. It's very, very sharp. It will take the tip of your finger off. So when you lift it, you might have a little bit of anxiety. You're especially careful. There's a kind of slightly fearful relationship with this. You've seen the guys in the sushi bar going like this. You think, I don't think so. That's okay, so the knife is dangerous. My fear is making me wary of the knife. Yeah? So the knife is taking on a particular kind of density for me because I'm afraid I might cut myself. Yeah? Is that a reasonable example? But the guy who is a well-trained Japanese sushi chef, he's not frightened at all. He's had years and years of training with a knife. He's just in there. Because he's got an absolute coordination. So his relationship with the knife is an extension of his beautiful choreographed movement. Whereas for us, it's something we have a kind of hesitancy around. The knife is neutral. But we, careful. So that's what your mother says, careful. As if the danger is in the object. Careless thing is ourselves. We have to be careful, not because the objects are dangerous, but because we are not skillful in being with them. So when you project badness into the object, through fear, through accidents, and so on, then it is as if there is some intrinsic quality in the object. So the research that is encouraged at this point is that you look for yourself, what are the things you're frightened of? So, for example, my mother had electric cookers always in the house. And that was because where I grew up is very near the big shipyards in Glasgow, in Clydebank. And in the war, there was a lot of bombs. And when the bombs fall on a house, and the house has gas, you get a double. You get the explosion from the bomb, and then the gas is going and the whole thing goes up. So she saw many, many houses exploding, and it's very frightening. So for her, she didn't like to have gas in the house. I would say, Mom, come on, it's quick. She said, not for me. And whenever there was a storm and there was thunder and lightning, she would go and stand in the door frame. I say, Mom, it's not the Blitz, these are not bombers going to kill you. It's just thunder and lightning. She said, I like this. This makes me feel good. I feel safe. So there you see trauma entering into the body, creating a false perception of danger, but it's quite understandable why that would be the case. So you can investigate for yourself why some things seem intrinsically valuable and special and really important. Maybe some place where you lived when you were a child, or you had some good holidays, and every time you remember that place you have a warm feeling. There's a kind of sentimental warmth. Is that inherent in the place? Are the people going there? Do they all have a good time? And similarly with negative things, is that a inherent or intrinsic truth, or is it relational? Is it arising due to cause and effect of that period in your life when that happened? So you can investigate that for yourself. Is there any truly defining truth or meaning or value in any object? Because if it were truly the case, everyone in the world would have to agree that that is the case. We would all agree that Coca-Cola is the real thing, which we may not agree with. So this is for you to investigate, because lurking somewhere in the background in your mind, there is probably a little cupboard full of things that you believe to be really, really good and really, really bad. Bad in themselves. We might say torture is bad in itself. And now we had all this stuff about chemical weapons are very, very bad in themselves. Well, clearly it's not a nice way to die. But is it any worse than a bomb falling out of the sky? Is it any worse than having a broken spine in an accident? Lots of ways of dying are not very pleasant. But we say, no, this is a red line. We will not allow this to happen, because we know that it is more bad than anything else. Worse than a bayonet. Why? Maybe we should take some of these politicians and make a selection. 10 politicians. Bayonet this one, gas that one, cut the nose off that one. And then they could write a report at the end of the experience and tell us, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad was your suffering? There's a lot of over-definition. And of course, it's not to justify or to say that any of these things is good. It's more to say these are constructs which arise due to causes and conditions. And the pain in torture is there sometimes for a purpose. People are trying to get information. A lot of the time it's to spread fear into the community, like in Argentina in the 1970s, 1980s. A lot of the torture was done in little middle-class houses in respectable areas, so the screams would be pumping out into the night air. You think, fuck, I better be a good boy. Don't want to get in trouble with these guys. So there's a pervasive quality that can go. There's many communications which are involved in that. So that how you get tortured to death is not just about you and the regime. We're making use of your screams for a purpose. So, what is this? We have to investigate. Where is the solid, definable truth in this situation? Maybe it's all communication. Something is being transacted. We know that certainly when there was the troubles in Ireland, they had a lot of particular beatings, beating on the kneecap, beatings on the ankles, then shooting through the kneecap. The surgeons became so exquisite at reconstructing knees that they started to find the right angle to shoot through the foot to break the maximum number of bones, so that the reconstruction of the foot was very difficult. Because this was to show, you fuck about, you see what's coming. You want to know what we'll do? This is it. So fear is what is often put out. But what is fear? When we feel fear, we think, aha, that's a shrinking. Shrinking is a movement. What's established? Nothing. If you're really frightened, you might shit yourself. That's also a movement. Movement is moving. There is no essence. So take it, really investigate your own life, your fears, your dreads, the things you avoid, and they happen. And they go through. In brief, the open actuality, the subject. All possible phenomena of samsara nirvana is without anything to be rejected, and so is naturally pure. Therefore, it is the unlimited purity. So, we, of course, live with hopes and fears. We live with a lot of anxiety about what might happen to us. So we would like to reject the things that upset us and have more of the things that please us. This is the discourse of the ego. So there is a very challenging example of this, which comes from Yeshe Tsogyal, who was the, the partner, she had a relationship with Padmasambhava. Yeshe Tsogyal had previously been the wife of the king. Yeshe Tsogyal had not received many teachings from Padmasambhava, and she went off on a pilgrimage to do some more practice, and on the way she was stopped by 7 bandits, and they raped her. Each one of them raped her. And she rested in the meditation, and she used this sexual contact to give blessing to each of the rapists, so that they had some awakening. And then she went on her journey. Now this is a way above and beyond what we can imagine in our own lives. But the principle is the same. What is happening? It's sensation. Maybe if there's not enough lubrication, there can be tearing in the tissues at the entry to the vagina and so on. Maybe the man is violent or rough, he might beat her, whatever. If somebody beats you in the face, you get sensation. If somebody holds you down, you get sensation. You get a lot of sensation. Sensation arises and passes. Its nature is empty. So if you stay with the ground openness, you have the self-liberation of this most awful kind of event. But when we look at it from an ordinary human point of view, and we are frightened and we don't want that to happen to us, then it seems terrible. I wouldn't like that. Because I would be feeling, this is something horrible, I don't want it to happen to me, why is it happening to me, and many, many other thoughts, as well as fear of infection, fear of pregnancy, and so on. There can be all kinds of things happening there. That I'm being used as an object, I'm this, I'm that. From the point of view of Dzogchen, this is very challenging. These are all narrative interpretations. Do we need this structure of interpretation? So, in Buddhism, when they talk of dukkha, dukkha means suffering. And the Buddha's first teaching is about the origin of suffering and the possibility of the removal of suffering. There's the fact of suffering, the origin of suffering, the ending of suffering, and the way to end the suffering. So what is suffering? Suffering is not the immediate pain, because nobody can stop pain. The Buddha himself had pains and difficulties. He got sick from time to time. Suffering is the way in which we experience the pain, which causes us to feel persecuted and reduced and isolated with it. It's the separative quality which is the nature of suffering itself. So in this extreme form, Yeshe Dzogchen was not separating off. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't experiencing, they are doing this to me. She was, as the text is saying very clearly, this is experience. Now, this is a very high level of awareness. For most of us, we're going to come into ego-centered emotional reactivity, which is very understandable. But it just shows, listen, the limit is our limit. The limit doesn't belong in any kind of event which can happen. It's how we would approach that event. So we've all experienced self-pity and sadness and not able to believe it, and it's awful. If we look back in our lives and remember these situations, nothing of value was developed through self-pity. All you do is shrink and become small. It doesn't help you face the actual difficulties of your life, because you just have to get on with it, because everything is moving. It's a dynamic world. So there is pain, there is sensation, which is pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. Now I'm having a lot of unpleasant sensation, which is moving and shifting in the course of the day. What does it mean? Who's going to say what it means? If you stay with the unborn clarity, it's the revelation of sensation. This is what's arising. Light and sound and sensation and smell and tension and release. This is what's occurring. Once you start to interpret it, it is terrible that this is happening to me. I don't want it to happen to me. You're now in a dualistic situation in which I am an isolated, powerless human being, and they are doing that to me. So that's a very challenging example, but it's exactly close to the text, that whatever the situation, we're always at this choice point. Relax and open, or contract and try to separate and avoid. But very often in life we can't avoid. None of us can avoid death. None of us can avoid heartache. None of us can avoid getting older. As the world economy changes, unemployment is going to increase big time with the rise of robots. There are many, many people whose lives are going to be transformed by forces outside themselves. Just like these innocent people in Syria. Suddenly you become a refugee. You didn't want that to happen. You never asked for that to happen. Well, that's what's manifesting. So, that's what he's saying here. It's unlimited purity. And then he says, just the last thing before we have to break, perfect purity is introduced in this way, so that by removing the wrong idea, that is to say, the idea of reification, solidification, separation, one will be freed from attachment to the belief that confusion is natural to one's mind. The purpose is the actualization of perfect purity. The essence actuality is naturally completely pure. So, confusion and all the kind of difficult experiences arise in the mind. They are not the mind. So, if you rest in the openness of the mirror, what arises is the reflection. And no reflection has ever occurred that has permanently damaged a mirror. It's not possible. Okay. So the mirror intimately expresses the reflection right within the bowels of itself, and it's not affected. The mind is pure from the very beginning. It's not touched by whatever arises. So, confusion is not part of the ground. Confusion is patterning of the content of the mind as it manifests. So, swirling thoughts, strong emotions, and so on, this is the energy of the mind creating patterns. And the patterns manifest as the 6 realms of samsara. Sometimes it's like the God realm, sometimes like a jealous God, human, animal, hungry ghost, hell realms. We all have some tastes of these experiences, expansive, contracting. These are the movements of the mind, but the mind itself is not touched. This is the essential basis of liberation. If you stay on the ground, all arisings are self-liberating. If you split into subject and object, you will become involved in adopting and rejecting, and confusion will appear to belong to you. So that's the heart teaching here. Now we have a break.